Hello, my secure transaction students. I'm coming at you today to talk about the assignment on buyers. And I think the best place to start is with provision 315 of Article 9. Pull this up quickly. There we go. 315. Article 9. All right. A security interest continues in collateral notwithstanding sale, lease, license, exchange, or other disposition thereof, unless the secured party authorized the disposition free of the security interest. So this is one of the beauties of Article 9, that in the event that the debtor does the unthinkable and sells off its collateral to some buyer, the security interest will continue in that collateral, even in the hands of the buyer, despite the sale or disposition of the collateral. And that allows the creditor to go after that collateral and take it from the hands of the buyer. And that is the contest that we're looking at in this section of the course. It's important to know that there are two types of buyers. There's the ordinary buyer, or simple buyer, let's call him, who purchases goods from a person who's not in the business of selling goods in the kind. This is when we have a factory that maybe sells off some excess old equipment to another factory that's interested in buying it. All right, that other factory that buys this old equipment, that's a simple buyer. There's another type of buyer, the buyer in the ordinary course of business. Buyer in the ordinary course of business is someone who buys goods from a seller who deals in goods of the kind. That is, someone who sells them all the time. The factory who sells off some old equipment isn't in the business of selling this factory equipment. They use it to make something else that they sell. But if you walk into a Walmart and purchase a snowblower or a hammer, you're a buyer in the ordinary course of business. Walmart's in the business of selling snowblowers and hammers, among other things. And so when you make that purchase, we will see free, entirely free of the security interest. It's great to be a buyer in the ordinary course of business. It's even better than being a purchase money secured party. Buyer in the ordinary course of business will take free of all security interest created by that buyer seller. And let's take a quick look at that. Since I mentioned it, we can look at here, 320. 9320, buyers of goods, buyer in the ordinary course of business. And here we have this priority rule, really is what it is, a priority rule, is that a buyer in the ordinary course of business takes free of a security interest created by the buyer's seller, even if the security interest is perfected, and even if the buyer knows of its existence. And that's a converse of the priority rule that applies to a simple buyer, not a buyer in the ordinary course of business, but a simple buyer. And we've looked at this section 9.317b. And here we talk about a buyer, not a buyer in the ordinary course of business, a simple buyer. And it says that a buyer here takes free of a security interest if the buyer gives value and receives delivery of the collateral without knowledge of the security interest and before it is perfected. So if you're a simple buyer and you want to buy this machinery, this old machinery from another factory, in order to make sure that you get priority over any creditors of the seller, you need to make sure that it's not the security interest of the seller's creditor is not perfected. And you can't have any knowledge even of the security interest. It's one of the few times that the UCC looks inside the mind of the party. So that's a clear distinction between simple buyers and buyers in the ordinary course of business. Buyers in the ordinary course of business, they will win even if the security interest is unperfected and even if they know about the security interest. So with those three concepts, the knowledge that security interest generally continues in the collateral, even in the hands of a buyer. It's not true for the buyer in the ordinary course of business. Buyer in the ordinary course of business will take free of security interests as long as they're created by their seller. And with respect to those simple buyers, the security interest continues, but those simple buyers will prevail. They will have priority either if the security interest was unperfected, or let me restate that. The simple buyer will have priority if the security interest is unperfected and the buyer had no knowledge of the security interest at the time of the purchase. If either of those things are true, the buyer loses. If both of those things the buyer can say no to, it wasn't perfected, it didn't have knowledge, and the buyer wins. It's harder for a simple buyer than a buyer in the ordinary course of business. Let's get to the problems. What's up first? Let us see here. Start with 82. Betty Consumer. Read along with me. Betty Consumer bought a television set from Distortion TV, a retail store. A month later, Distortion went bankrupt, and a minor functionary from the Octopus National Bank showed up on her stoop and asked her to turn over the set. He explained that ONB held a perfected security interest in all of Distortion's inventory, and that since Distortion had not paid off its debt to ONB, the bank was repossessing. So here's the retail store who'd taken a loan from ONB, secured on all their inventory. And now he wants the TV set back. What should Miss Consumer tell the bank's flunky? That she is a buyer in the ordinary course of business, and she takes free of all security interest created by her seller, which was the Distortion TV. Okay. B, would it matter if she had known that ONB had perfected its security interest? No. Doesn't matter. Knowledge is unimportant. Even if she knew, even if it was perfected, she wins. Would it matter if she bought at a liquidation sale and was informed by the Stones owners that the store planned to file a bankruptcy petition the following week? Perhaps. We're edging into bankruptcy law, which we cannot dip a finger into without taking a full dive. But I will dip a finger by saying that these any transactions or dispositions made right before bankruptcy, I think it's at least 6 weeks before bankruptcy, can be easily unwound by the trustee in bankruptcy because it's a transparent attempt to liquidate your assets when you know you're going in for bankruptcy. Make a pile of money, sell it all, make a pile of money, pay off some debtors, keep the rest yourself, flee the country. That's what trustees in bankruptcy can stop by unwinding transactions, but just for your general knowledge. But what if Miss Consumer had put the TV on layaway? Yes, layaway does give, or the UCC rather does give the right to those who put items on layaway, and then the store is bankrupt, and of course the secured creditors want to come in and seize it, and the trustee in bankruptcy wants a place to stay. Can the person who's already paid towards it redeem it and get that item that they've been paying for? And yes, this is a customer protection law that allows for those who have paid over a certain amount, 50%, will then be able to take those items if they tender full payment. You got to show up with the rest of the amount, which it's hard to do. That's why you put things on layaway. So how helpful this is to people of slender means, I'm not sure. one of those phantom benefits. Okay, let's see where we are now. Problem 83. Deering Milliken was a textile manufacturer who routinely sold Oh my goodness, I'm going to start over here. Deering Milliken was a textile manufacturer. It routinely sold textiles on credit to Mill Fabrics, a firm that finished the textiles into dyed and patterned fabrics. Very good. It was Mill's Fabrics' practice to resell the fabrics to Tambro Fabrics, a wholesaler. Okay. While the textiles were still in Deering's warehouse, Mill Fabrics contracted to buy them from Deering, signing a security agreement to the effect that giving Deering a financing statement which it duly filed. In turn, Mill Fabrics sold the textiles to Tambro, which paid Mill Fabrics for them, but delayed taking delivery for a few weeks so that the fabrics remained in Deering's possession. Dealings of this kind were common in the textile industry, and all parties knew of the other's interest. Unfortunately, Mill Fabrics became insolvent and never paid Deering for the textiles. Deering, therefore, refused to deliver them to Tambro. The latter sued. Who should prevail? See 320E and its official comments. Let's see what we have here, really. We have a manufacturer who's selling textiles to Mill Fabrics. Now, Mill Fabrics is a buyer in the ordinary course of business, right? Because that's what Deering sold, was textiles. And even if the buyer is a company, it doesn't matter, still a buyer in the ordinary course of business. Okay, and then Mills would resell the fabrics to Tambro, who would then sell them to retail stores. But they're all buyers in the ordinary course of business. Even Tambro is a buyer in the ordinary course of business because Mills Fabrics is in the business of selling fabrics. Okay. So, but the textiles, and this is the key to this problem, this is what it's all about, is that the textiles that were sold were still in the manufacturer, Deering's warehouse. Mill Fabrics contracted to buy them from Deering, okay, signing a security agreement to the effect and giving the effect to that effect and giving Deering a financing statement, which it duly filed. That was polite of them. But here we have a purchase money security interest. The buyer is a buyer in the ordinary course of business, buying them from Deering, who's the manufacturer, sold textiles, sold things of that type. And this buyer in the ordinary course of business gave to Deering a security interest in the thing that they bought. So Deering's a purchase money secured party. Okay, this is what a lot of secured transactions is about, is identifying the components of the transaction. Okay, so while the textiles are still in Deering's warehouse, they contracted them, okay, and in turn, Mill Fabrics sold the textiles to Tambro, which paid Mill Fabrics for them, but they didn't take delivery. So the fabrics remained in Deering's possession. It was common, apparently. Unfortunately, Mill Fabrics became insolvent, never paid Deering for the textiles. Deering therefore refused to deliver them to Tambro. The latter sued. Who should prevail? See 9320E in its official comment. Remember, Tambro is a buyer in the ordinary course of business. Mill was in the business of selling textiles to them. So they should win. They should take free of the security interest that their seller, Mill, had earlier created in favor of Deering. That's the rule of the buyer in ordinary course of business, but it doesn't apply under 9320E if the collateral is in possession of that earlier secured party, the secured party of the buyer's seller. which is exactly what we have here. There's the statute that subsections A and B, this super priority of buyers in the ordinary course of business, this whole section, this powerful section that gives biocobs their super hero qualities, does not apply, simply does not apply. Subsections A and B do not affect the security interest in goods in the possession, and that's the key word, of a secured party. So in this case, normally Tambro would have won. It's buyer in the ordinary course of business. It bought those textiles, so what? They're somewhere else. They're in Deering's warehouse. It's buyer in the ordinary course of business. It takes free the security interest of the buyer-seller. And that's the exception that Section E gets to, that if the seller's creditor is in possession still of the collateral in this place, we're going to let them keep it. We're going to let them win. Buyer in the ordinary course of business loses. What lesson can we draw from this? If you really want to be sure that you benefit from the super priority of being a biocob, take possession. Don't buy something that is in possession of another entity. Or if you do, just be aware you're not going to get the benefits of the biocomp with respect to that party. They have a security interest. Okay, let's move on. All right. Okay. 83. Move forward. I think we are going on to 84. Yeah. Good. There it is. Octopus National Bank had a perfected security interest in all cars on Smile Motors lot. Good. Must have been a perfected security interest in the inventory. Be one way to do it. Smiles owned $5,000 in past due insurance premiums to its insurance agent, Howard Teeth, who showed up one morning to buy a new car. President of Smiles first gave Howard a check for $5,000, but Howard immediately endorsed it back over to Smiles when he saw a new car he wanted to buy. Okay. Is Howard a buyer in the ordinary course of business, so as to take free of ONB's security interest? And then secondly, if Howard then sold the car, would Howard be liable to ONB for conversion? Fantastic. Let's look at the definition of the buyer in the ordinary course of business, and that's really the key to this problem. Pulling it up here, pulled it up here. Buyer in the ordinary course of business. Buyer that buys in good faith, without knowledge that the sale violates the rights of another person, ordinary course from another person. Other than a pawnbroker, they have their own nefarious set of laws. In the business of selling goods of that kind, right? Okay. Person that buys in good faith from someone selling goods of that kind. Person buys in the ordinary course if the sale of the person comports with usual or customary practices. And this is maybe the first speed bump here. Because is it ordinary for Smiles to sell a car in return for a endorsed check? To hand a check over and have endorsed back? Questionable. It's a foothold for the attorney that needs to argue in that direction. Okay, a buyer in the ordinary course of business may buy for cash, by exchange of property, or on secured or unsecured credit, and may acquire goods or documents of title under a pre-existing contract for sale. Okay. Only a buyer that takes possession of the goods, or has a right to recover the goods from the seller, may be a buyer in the ordinary course of business. And I think this is a corollary to the earlier rule we had, where a buyer in the ordinary course could not retrieve the goods from the seller's debtor because the seller's debtor had possession. So if you want to enjoy the benefits of being a Biocob, make sure you leave the store with your goods. You need to be in possession. And this is the critical point, that a buyer in the ordinary course of business does not include a person that acquires goods in a transfer in bulk or a security for, or in total or partial satisfaction of a money debt. And that's where the author of the textbook is going here, is if you take he offered the check, Smiles offered the check, Howard accepted it, so now he had this check, and he endorsed it back over, I believe. Let me double check the facts here. I want to get this straight. Yes, Howard just endorsed it back over to Smiles. So, how would you analyze this under the law? There are two ways. Now, if you really wanted to, if you were Howard's attorney, you would say, I'm a buyer in the ordinary course of business. I bought this car from someone who's in the business of selling cars. Yeah, I paid him with a check, but that's okay. I had a check. So it happened to be from him, the seller, for an outstanding obligation, but so what? I didn't say, look, cancel the money you owe me and give me that car instead. That's not what I said. If I'd said that, I'm being Howard's attorney. If he had said that, then I'd say, you're not a buyer in the ordinary course of business, Howard. I'm sorry. You got to pay cash or money, or you got to pay something. Okay. But in fact, in this case, Howard did pay something. He didn't just say, cancel the debt, give me the car. He said, I have this check. So the attorney for Howard would argue that he wasn't just canceling the debt, but that he paid good value for it, and therefore was a buyer in the ordinary course of business and takes the automobile free of Smiles' creditor's security interest. But now let's go into the mind of Smiles' creditor, who has a security interest in the automobiles, understands that buyers in the ordinary course of business who come on the lot are going to take free of their security interest, but they still want to make their security interest as broad and powerful as possible. So they argue in this case, where there's been a sale to Howard, that this transaction, this payoff of a check to Howard for his services, and then endorsing it back over to Smiles and taking the car, that's really just if you look at it from 30,000 feet, it's just a cancellation of debt for a car. So, and in that case, then Howard would not be a buyer in the ordinary course of business, and then would be subject to the security interest, and would probably lose that to the creditor, and would have to sue Smiles under a breach of the Article 2 warranty of title, which includes any damage stemming from an existing security interest. So that would be the way it would play out in litigation. But that's the question that this author is getting to here is, was it a cancellation of debt for the receipt of the car, or could you characterize it as something else? And I'll leave it at that. 84, I think we're skipping one. 85, yep, we're going to 87. So 85 and 86. Cast to the side. Andy Audio bought a stereo receiver on credit from Voice of Japan, an electronics store, giving it a purchase money security interest in the receiver. Okay, yeah. So Voice of Japan has a PMSI in the stereo receiver that Andy bought. Voice of Japan did not file a financing statement, and 6 months later, when Andy still owed Voice of Japan $300, he held a garage sale, sold the receiver to Nancy Neighbor for $200 in cash. If Andy stops making payments to Voice of Japan, can it repossess the receiver from Nancy? C9 320B in its official comment. This is what's known traditionally as the garage sale rule. But I like to call it the Craigslist rule, because I think there's a much greater volume of transactions among private people, of used goods, used consumer goods, in Craigslist rather than a garage sales. But however you want to call it, this is a rule that applies to these private interactions in consumer goods between two private people. Garage sale, yard sale, Craigslist, however you want to put it. It doesn't really matter what the mechanism is, it's the nature of the sale. And so let's look at 9320. A and B. B is the rule. Buyer of consumer goods. A buyer of consumer goods from a person who used or bought the goods for use primarily for personal, family, or household purposes. So look, this is a buyer. So if you buy goods from someone who's using them for personal purposes, so if you buy someone as consumer goods, then you as the buyer take free of a security interest, even if it's perfected. Oh, this sounds good. This sounds like if you're at a garage sale on Craigslist, you're buying someone's old consumer goods that they use. Now there could be a company, the seller, the retailer has a security interest in it, and you're buying it. Maybe it's an old PlayStation. They're done with PlayStation. You got an Xbox. You buy their PlayStation. Is Best Buy going to come knock on your door? I mean, you're not a buyer in the ordinary course of business, right? You can't rely on that because you bought it from your neighbor's yard sale. They're not in the business of selling PlayStations. So you're kind of an ordinary buyer, and that's not good if Best Buy, already has a perfected security interest. So, right, because they have an automatic preferred security interest and perfected and purchase money security interests, right, in the goods. Well, let's look at how to work this out. So you can't go to the BioCob, but there needed to be some consumer protection for this classic American tradition of yard sales. So let's see what it looks like. If you are at a yard sale, you're a buyer at a yard sale, or everyone's selling their consumer goods, you will take free of a security interest even if it's perfected. So this goes against the rule in 9317. If the buyer buys without knowledge, so you still can't have knowledge. Maybe compare this rule to the 317 rule. You'll win even if it's perfected, so that's good. That's kind of like the buyer in the ordinary course of business rule. So perfection's not a problem. But you can't have knowledge, which most people don't. If you're at a yard sale, you don't have knowledge of these security interests. That's usually not an issue. For value, you give 50 cents or a buck. You're buying it for your own consumer interests, right? So you're buying at a yard sale these consumer goods for your own personal use. So they'll be consumer goods for you. You give some value. You don't have knowledge. Who cares if they're perfected? And there's no filing of a financing statement. Then you win. So, the buyers at a garage sale or Craigslist are pretty well covered from security interests. The only way that Best Buy or another debtor or secured party can defeat the Craigslist buyer is by filing a financing statement. Yes, by giving them knowledge, but we're not going to have an advertising campaign to tell everyone in the world about our security interests. So you file a financing statement. So we know normally that the buyers in the ordinary course of business, purchase money, security interests in consumer goods, which are usually made to buyers of the ordinary course of business, are automatically perfected. You don't have to file a financing statement. So Best Buy, typically doesn't file a financing statement, but then their PlayStation that they financed gets sold at a garage sale. So now under this rule, 320B, they lose. The only way they could have protected themselves was by filing a financing statement. And that's why retailers who have purchase money security interests in consumer goods, if they really want to, they will be perfected and they will defeat other secured parties. So they get a lot of protections. The one protection they don't really get is against garage sale purchasers, buyers. So if you want that extra level of protection, file a financing statement anyway. So Best Buy, maybe they have a policy, I don't know, where they don't file a financing statement for things up to $5,000, but if it's a more than $5,000 purchase, file a financing statement to add that extra layer of security because it's a bigger transaction. I don't know if that's the case, but I might recommend it to them, and you should, as you represent retailers in big ticket items. Okay, where do we go from here? Okay, so how do we deal with this problem 89 about Paul Pop? Sounds almost like Pol Pot. Paul Pop was a rock singer, borrowed $8,000 from a bank to buy stereo equipment for his road show. I wish him good luck. This sounds like quite a gamble, but exciting. And on April 2nd, Paul purchased the equipment, and on April 10th, ONB filed its financing statement. However, in the interim, on April 8th, in between the purchase and the filing of the financing statement, Paul sold the equipment to Use Stereo Heaven. I guess the music career quickly took a downturn. He sold it to Use Stereo Heaven, and they had no knowledge, of course, of the bank's security interest. So now ONB, when Paul Pop stops paying his monthly payments and defaults, does ONB or Use Stereo Heaven have the superior claim to the equipment? And what would we think under the rules that we've learned so far? This is not a buyer in the ordinary course of business, because Paul Pop is not in the business of selling stereo equipment, stereo receivers. And so the purchaser is just a regular buyer. And the regular buyer versus a perfected secured party, or a secured party, let's say, is that the regular buyer, the simple buyer, is going to win if the secured party was unperfected and there was no knowledge on the part of the buyer that there was a security interest. And here we're told that the buyer has no knowledge, and we know that it was unperfected when it was purchased. Right? Because the financing statement was filed on the 10th. The purchase took place on the 8th. So under 9317B, the priority rule regarding simple buyers and secured parties, in this case, the buyer would win because secured party is unperfected and there is no knowledge on the part of the buyer. But here, and this is another aspect in which the purchase money secured party has super priority, superpowers, is that if a purchase money secured party is set up against a simple buyer, purchase money secured party has a 20-day grace period. Just as it has a 20-day grace period to file its financing statement, it has the same during that 20-day grace period. If any buyers arise or lien creditors arise, they will defeat the buyer and the lien creditor, even though they're not yet perfected. They have the 20-day grace period. But during that 20-day grace period, they're kind of treated as if they were perfected, which means that they defeat all buyers, simple buyers, and they defeat all lien creditors that arise after the purchase. So that's another benefit of being a purchase money secured party, is that you get even stronger rights against buyers and lien creditors than typical secured parties do. Because typical secured parties, they need to be perfected, or there needs to be knowledge. But when you're a purchase money secured party, you don't need to be perfected. You've got the 20 days. And then after 20 days, you need to be perfected, yes. But that's the answer to this question. So who has it? But ONB has superior claim to the equipment as a purchase money secured party. And then finally, one last problem to round out your knowledge of buyers. It's problem 92. Mr. and Mrs. Halyard purchased a large sailboat with money borrowed from Boilerplate National Bank. Which then took a security interest therein. It promptly filed a financing statement in the proper place. Again, purchase money secured party. They borrowed from Boilerplate National Bank, who loaned them money to buy this boat, and they took a security interest therein, and they filed a financing statement. Very good. The Halyards sold the boat to Oil Slick Boat Sales Incorporated, a used boat concern, telling Oil Slick of the bank's interest and of the necessity of making monthly payments to the bank. Okay, so now they told them, this is the Halyards who bought it. They're the original debtors. Now they're selling it because they can't afford it to keep it up anymore. They want it. So they're selling it, and they're not, this is not a buyer in the ordinary course of business here. They're buying it from the Halyards, who are not in the business of selling boats. So they're just a simple buyer, this Oil Slick Boats. But they know of the security interest. They were told of the security interest. So they're not going to take priority over a regular secured party because they know of the security interest and they bought it. Okay, Oil Slick then turned around and resold the boat to Mr. and Mrs. Blink, innocent people who paid full value for the boat, believing Oil Slick had clear title. That is, title without any security interests clouding it. When B&B did not receive its usual monthly payment, it investigated, found the boat, and repossessed it. So again, we have this. Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Blink are going to want to keep it. Has the Blink's property been converted, or don't they fit into 9320A? And again, we look at 9320A. Tells us about, let's get back there. Oh, that's 8. All right. Getting closer. 9. 320A. A buyer takes free of a security interest created by buyer-seller. And that's what we're getting at now, is that this security interest that's now coming to haunt the Blinks, it wasn't created by their seller, Oil Slick. It was created by their seller, the previous owners, the Halyards. And so under 9320A, they don't take free of the Halyards' security interest that they granted to BNB, Boilerplate National Bank. Yeah. Okay. And so that's what I want to, here, let's read a little further on. The created by the buyer-seller language will often cause trouble for buyers buying goods from a used merchandise dealer. And that is something to take away. That, for both Walmart, the original retailer, and Play It Again Sports, which is in the business of selling sporting equipment, but used sporting equipment. How do you, if you want to buy something from Walmart, let's say a soccer goal, a big soccer goal structure and net, you pay a few $100s for. You buy it from Walmart, you know you're going to be protected from any security interests that are created by Walmart. But if you go to a secondhand store like Play It Again Sports, you know that they bought them from someone else who may have created a security interest in them. So in those secondhand stores, you want to be a little more careful if you're buying big ticket items. Again, if you're buying $20 roller skates, I wouldn't worry about anyone coming after them. It's not worth the time and effort and attorney's fees. But if you're buying a big ticket item from a used, let's say you're buying a used Zamboni from a Zamboni refurbisher. Yeah, they're in the business of selling Zamboni, so you're a BioCob, but maybe they bought the Zamboni from a retailer who had borrowed money from a bank that has security interest in it, just like the problem in front of us. Then you're not going to be covered. So know the limit of the BioCob super priority. They only get to take free of their seller, of those security interests created by their seller. And that risk that the security interest was created by someone other than the seller, that increases if you buy from used goods stores. So, that's what I'd like you to take away from problem 92. We won't talk about entrustment because that's a question really of Article 2. Interesting that if you entrust someone with goods, this is the basic upshot of it. I won't hold you responsible for it, but if you entrust someone with goods, like you go to a watch repair shop and you entrust them with goods, they also sell secondhand watches, and they're repairing it, and they happen to sell it to someone else. When you entrust someone with goods like that to repair, they will have the right to resell those goods and resell good title. And so those buyers will be able to take good title, and then your recourse is going to be against this watch repair shop. But that is the concept of entrustment briefly. Okay, well that brings to the end this assignment on buyers. And we're going to come back soon and continue our adventure in secured transactions.